All right. As I mentioned, as a 20-year trader, 25 in the business, traded a lot of elections. None had more market moving potential than 2016. 2018, the midterms, if you guys remember, part of the group, we had the room open for November 2016, Trump Clinton. We had the room open for the midterms in 2018 when it looked like maybe the Republicans were going to keep the House. As soon as they did, and the market went lower. That was kind of a weird night where it looked like the GOP could hang on, and all of a sudden Fox News comes out and says Democrats going to regain control, and markets broke. So there's always those nuances where more eyes and ears on stuff that matters on different channels, different states that are important. We'll get into that, but just some scenarios that I rolled out. I'm not an expert pundit, but I do have a good feel on what could move the market. This time, there's kind of like a splash of what people are thinking. There's a lot of I don't knows out there. Last time around in 2016, it was they were just pricing in Clinton. So when Trump upset her, it changed the, we broke and went limit down because certainty turned to uncertainty just based on what was priced in. When they realized that, wait, this might not be bad, they re-rallied within 24, 48 hours, went to and through where they started. But that was 4 years ago. So now we have a lot of different scenarios, and let's go through them. And if you guys have ideas or thoughts, like Peter, who's a longtime Edge member, talked about, he's one of the first scenarios I'm going to cover because I liked it. So scenarios, and then this website 270 to win. Don't go to it now. We're going to go to it in a second, and I'll walk you through it. It's a pretty interactive site. But what and where is priced in now? What and where is or are priced in right now? And so you talk to four people, you might get four different answers. The stimulus is a big part of the before and the after. They're pricing in, they got it, and then they might not have it till after the election. And there's some risks to that I'll explain through the scenarios. But right now, it's optimistic that they're going to get it. Every time Pelosi says something that's in the last 2 days, that is, we got something, we're closer, we rally, and then we come back. So the market's afraid to rally too much. It's actually afraid to break too much. We'll get into the polls in a second, and I'm not here to take a survey of who believes in what, but I always go off the notion that in 2016, after that election, the one thing, maybe the only thing everybody agreed was that the polls got it wrong. Even the pollsters, even the exit polls got it wrong. Everybody admitted they got it wrong. So my question is, 4 years later, what did you change to make us believe you're not going to get it wrong this time? And I don't think there's been much changes made by pollsters to adjust from why they got it wrong in 16 to why they might have it off in 2020. But again, the poll that matters obviously is on November 3rd. So that's the date. And obviously, hopefully everybody knows that much. We are, for Edge people, for Edge members and traders, going to open up the room just for Edge guys November 3rd at about 6 or 7 Central. I haven't decided yet. We'll have our TVs on. We'll have this interactive map and people sharing with what they hear. We'll open up some mics and do it similar to 2018 and 2016. So what do we got? First thing, a clean win for either side. Now, Peter brought this up, and I thought it was pretty smart. And he goes, certainty. If there's a winner, we don't know who's going to win, or they can't, neither side concedes. The market's not going to like that, and it's going to have at least a near-term bearish reaction if it's a, non-call race by the early morning hours of November 4th, at least. No concession, and then the thought of bringing in the courts and all that stuff. That's bearish. Clean win would first be a little bullish if some other things line up, but a clean win would be something the markets would prefer to see if you're looking for upside. Another scenario is Biden wins and the GOP keeps the Senate and the House keeps, or the Democrats keep the House. So nothing changes with Congress, but the White House changes. And the thought is that could be bearish because of a gridlock of the stimulus. Now, this has something to do with whether or not the stimulus gets passed by this week, at least gets agreed on, vote on, whether it's distributed or not. Is that out of the way before the election? Because the markets feel like if it's not, Biden wins, but the Republicans keep the Senate, there might not be a stimulus, or at least what either side wants, and it's just more kicking the can. Markets don't want to see no stimulus. Now, this has a lot to do with whether or not they have one before the end of the week. That part could be a moot point as far as, well, they already got the stimulus. All right, so that's where I would land on that. If they have a stimulus and this becomes the outcome, Biden wins, Republicans keep the Senate, Dems keep the House. I'm reading that would also be bullish because financial markets like gridlock. So not one party could be too radical in where they take economic policy or tax policy. That's the uncertainty that comes with Biden is he does have, whether you agree or don't agree, he does have tipping things over. And if the Republicans could keep a Senate, then there's that check and balance. But I read generally a divided government is good, especially if a stimulus is reached before the election. And so that's that scenario. The next one is no stimulus before Friday or before the election. Biden wins, but the GOP goes to the Senate. That's just an offshoot of this, and we just covered it. That would be, again, bearish. Next one is a clean sweep. Biden wins, they keep the House, and they get the Senate. Now, that top line, Biden wins, House stays Democratic, and they take control of the Senate. That's going to be a whipsaw. And the reason why I say that is, one thing I read, a couple things I read is they have a big, nice stimulus. Okay? If they don't have one before the election. But they could make a lot of uncertain changes if they have all three, if they have both houses and the White House. So that's an interesting one. And that might take a little longer through the night to actually come to that conclusion. What we look for as traders, remember, we're not sitting and watching these returns as, someone with a blue hat or a red hat on, draped in a flag, or worried about who we want to win as an American. But as a trader, how is the reaction, if any, going to be to the market when this happens or that happens? That's the important part of this preview. And this is important when we get into probably opening up the room for election night at 6 to go over what we don't know now, but we'll know by then, because we're still just shy of 2 weeks away. So it's important to know that what are the changes? What are the things that could flip us bullish, bearish? We had that, if you guys remember, in 2016, and I got to cover it because I remember like it was yesterday. You guys that were there remember what was the key to the downside. Remember, the markets had Clinton and all the betting services had Clinton winning. So if she won or it looked like she was going to win, the markets would jump a little bit. And then when it appeared Trump won Florida, it took a little bit of a dive, then Ohio, and then it was off to the races to the downside. Just based on it, got it wrong, like everybody else. But the Panhandle in Florida, look at that, is in a different time frame or time zone. They're in Central Time, so their polls close a little later. Whereas the East Coast, which is most of Florida, their polls close earlier, so the returns will come earlier. This part of Florida is heavily Democratic. Some of the I-Corps corridor, they call it, is a little bit of both ways, and the rest is pretty much Republican, especially the Panhandle. So when Trump versus Clinton in 2016 was like, it was a half a point difference with many of the totals in fact, Trump might have had like a 49 to 48 half lead, and they're going back and forth. And it was all of a sudden, someone said it, I said it, someone on TV said it, and I yelled it out, the Panhandle. The Panhandle is still yet to be counted, and he's really close with a half a point lead without a heavily Republican, many Republican counties in the Panhandle. All of them are Republican and deep red. The market went down because, remember, Trump wins down, Clinton wins up in 16. It'll be different now in certain cases. But that was Florida, and Florida has 29 electoral votes, and it's always a swing state. And it's almost like he has to win it, but we'll get into that in a second. That was a keystone. That was a pivotal moment. And then the other thing that was a pivotal moment was, remember, the New York Times had that probability where it was 90 something percent. I think it got up to 98% Clinton was going to win. And we'll go down. We'll go down. Every time they reported it was a lot lower. Lower it went, the lower the market went, anticipating Trump had a better and better chance to win. That's a little bit of sensationalism. Now, what goes into that number is what? A lot of their stuff and maybe some nonsense, and they obviously got it wrong. And what they were doing was getting ahead of the media. What I want people to understand as part of this session is the media is all in it together as far as when they're releasing certain results, because their main thing, and they all agree, they want ratings. They want people to watch their particular channels, not jump around, but watch who they have the longest as possible. They knew Pennsylvania was called for Trump an hour, 2 hours before they actually called it. Clinton had already called and conceded, and that Trump was walking on stage. And then they all call Pennsylvania and put him over the top. So it's all, it's they're controlling the levers of what they know, and everybody's in on it. The AP, the newspapers, the TV media, as far as that goes, to keep people watching as long as possible. But there's a lot of things that can get priced in as far as before all that. Now, Trump wins. Everything pretty much stays the same. Trump wins. The House stays with the Democrats and the Senate stays with the GOP. Essentially, nothing changes. In my opinion, as long as it's a clean victory, right? Going back off the first point that Peter brought to our attention last week, as long as it's a clean victory and there's a concession, that could end up being bullish because of the certainty that nothing might change, right? As far as major tax policy or economic policy or a Green New Deal and all the other stuff that's been kicked around on Joe Biden's side. There's still a check and balance, but it's what we've had the last 2 years now. Is there a chance Trump wins, House goes back to Democrats, and Senate goes to stays with Republicans? Yeah, there's always that chance of a clean sweep the other way. That's how it was in 2016. And they broke, but they broke because of the uncertainty of who they thought was going to win, who actually won. That one, I don't think is going to make a difference if they win all three. All of a sudden, we go down because they're worried. Remember, the market likes certainty, even if the certainty might be negative, over uncertainty, even if the uncertainty might prove to be positive. Exactly the initial reaction in 2016. They went limit down because of the uncertainty, but once they figure it out, wait a second, the uncertainty might not be too bad, and then it cleaned up, and they rallied 2 days later. Rallied all the way back in just a couple of days. All right, so that's important to note, is not to overthink it. And we'll check reactions in real time and then get a real good clue as to how things are laying out. Comes down to not what you worry about, not who you want to win, but if you're a trader, you have to check the pom-poms at the door and trade reaction. Let's say you want Trump to win and it looks like he's going to lose, and there's maybe an upside potential in a trade that we see based on the reactions, and then there's a pivotal point and you don't want to get involved because you're mad. Well, then you're not doing your job. So you got to check your pom-poms at the door in respect to trading what you see, not what you think. All right. Now let's get into, I think, a pretty fun website that you have. And these aren't the only scenarios, right? And what I'm saying is just framework of what I read and what I think. Getting into it, the election night is what's most important to kind of gauge on the, and by the way, it's not going to be a typical overnight session, right? There'll be more liquidity, more people are doing what we're going to do because it's a major event, like 18 and like more so 16. So 270 to win. What is that? That is the website. I've told you guys about this before. Google it, but it's literally 270towin.com. You blow it up, gives you a nice interactive map with changing the colors. Red. Well, wait a second. Before we get to this, this was the best. This was the best page of this whole slide of this whole presentation. Republicans, the elephant, Dems, the donkey. GOP, unless maybe you're not from this country, is Grand Old Party, which is another phrase for Republicans. Democrats over here. One of the things I added is must need surprise based on states. So Trump needs, well, forget about needs. What are must states for Trump? I have, to me, North Carolina, Arizona, but that's late. So we're going to know a lot more before we know about this. Again, this is just my opinion. He could lose any one of these states and still win. Georgia, Texas, and Iowa. These are all states he won in 2016, but, some people think are in play. Any of these states, especially Georgia, Texas, seem to go to Biden. We know something sooner rather than later. All right. North Carolina, because it's on the East Coast and might get returned sooner rather than later, is pivotal too, based on not if he wins it, but if he ends up losing it or they call it for Biden. That could be an early sign that, wait a second, he carried this state in 2016 and it flipped. Now, that's important. What is he? That's a must to me. That's a must. The other thing is, what is the, going backwards now. What is the needs? What would he like to get? All right. I think he needs a Florida because he won it last time, and Ohio. He not only won Ohio last time, but he won it by nearly 10 points. That was a swing state, and it's been going Democrat the last few election cycles, and all of a sudden he not only wins it, he wins it by 10 points. That was another pivotal moment 4 years ago because Ohio has similar demographics to Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and that was that blue wall that the Democrats have held on for a while. So Ohio, Florida, and then those states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. He won these three states by a combined like 70,000 votes. Not a lot. Thin margins on all three. Pennsylvania is the most important because it's got the most electoral votes in 20. That was the one they called late because they put them over the top and they wanted to keep ratings. These are all important states that would also go into Biden's camp, right? He'd like to have them, maybe needs, well, not maybe, but needs some of them. What would be a surprise? All right. So these are important ones to see if they go his way, especially Florida and Ohio, ones that he had. But what would be a surprise? New Hampshire, even though it's only a few electoral votes. And then there's a congressional district that gives out a vote or two that they had won, I think, in 2016. But not to get in the weeds, that's a state. Minnesota is a state, would be a surprise, but they say it's in play. It's a state that a Republican hasn't won in a long time. And Nevada, and that's out west, so you're not going to hear about that till later, and we might already know who won by that point. But these are three states that would be a surprise, that if we didn't know what was going on and he wins Nevada, that gives us a heads up. But at that point, we probably already know. Minnesota, again, if we don't know much and he's going to win that state or doing really well in that state, all of a sudden, that's a tipping point. So the must for Biden are the surprise for Trump, and the surprise for Biden are essentially the must for Trump. And see how that goes? So the surprise for Biden would be if he picked up a North Carolina or a Texas or a Arizona, although he's got a better chance to win it. A Georgia would be a surprise and a pretty nice pickup and flip and a tell, huge tell as to what others are thinking and where they go if they could flip Georgia. Now, if it's a foregone conclusion, Trump kills him in Georgia or something else, that gives a little tell. So just understand these states, all right, the way I lined them out. Iowa, same thing. Trump won it, and in 2016, should win it again. But it's kind of sort of been in play. Now, the polls, everybody's got their opinions on whether they're right or wrong. All I know is that they weren't right 4 years ago, and I don't think anything changed to make them right today. The exit polls are generally always right, and they were even wrong. What happens is late in the afternoon, around 5 or 6 o'clock Eastern time, campaigns and the media get these exit polls, and they generally shine a really good light on who's going to win. And that was Clinton also. So all this media and the Trump campaign and the Clinton campaign went into 5, 6 o'clock at night on November 8th of 16, thinking the results were. So that when they got Florida, which was the biggest tell, wow, he wins Florida. And then the Ohio, not just winning Ohio, but winning it by a lot, calling it early. That's important. If he wins it and they call it early, they have similar demographics to Michigan, Wisconsin, even some parts of Pennsylvania. And they're going to have, what did he win it last time? See, those are stats they didn't have in 2016. What he won last time. And what he might have lost by slimmer margins like Minnesota, like New Hampshire, and such. All right. So this important slide to go back on. Now let's bring in this 270 to win. All right. And it's an interactive map where all the red states are almost certain to go to Trump. That's why it's really important. If he flips Texas, look at this. If you go Texas red to blue, look at that, how much it slides the scale. Let's keep it red. And when you're in beige, that means it's obviously a swing and a toss-up. Not that they have Ohio red, but let's say Biden wins. Could Trump still win if he wins these other ones? Yes, but he's got to win all three: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Florida. But if you lose Ohio, you would think that is going to pick one of these three off, if not all three, because he won Ohio by a lot last time. And slim, like 10, 12,000 votes in Pennsylvania, a total of 70 in all three of these. So let's say he wins Ohio again and wins Florida again. Obviously, he's at 306. That's where he was. This is the way the map looked in 2016. Almost exactly. 306 to 232. He could still lose a Pennsylvania by a narrow margin and still be the president. He could lose Michigan. If these are three narrow margin states like they were in 16 by 15,000 each, he could lose two out of these three and still be, but he can't lose all three. Or if one of them is Michigan that he loses, but he picks this one up, but loses that one, then we got ourselves, 270. He remains president. But then there's this. That's not New Hampshire. It's Maine. Did I say New Hampshire? I think Maine is the one with the congressional district, and Nebraska. I made a mistake. But New Hampshire is a state that they think he has a chance of winning. Again, that would be a surprise, and that's why I put it in the surprise column. So when you play around with this, and that's what you got to do, it's he's not going to win Illinois, meaning Trump, California, or New York. Nevada, it's only got 6. So when you boil everything down, to me, for you guys, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida, not only because they're swing states, but they have a decent amount of votes, electoral votes. 18 in Ohio, 20 Pennsylvania, 29 big ones in Florida. Like I said, though, these states like North Carolina, Georgia, Texas, it's all over, but North Carolina, Georgia, if for some reason we get some sort of not only returns on North Carolina that he wins, did he win by more than he won in 16? That's what they're going to tell you then. If he loses North Carolina and that comes out early, that doesn't bode well because he won it and it was one of those states or one of these states that they say is in play. Now to the polls, and what's interesting on this website is you could go to the top here under president, and you could go to latest presidential polls, and it gives you the latest ones all the way up till today, where Pennsylvania, he's got an 8-point lead. Texas, it's a tie. Now if you think Trump is going to win or you want Trump to win, you better hope that these polls aren't even close, especially this one. He's even winning Iowa. Now, Rasmussen has been more generous towards Trump in all their polls, and he's got, this one just came out, and Biden jumped up a little bit. I think when you go into Rasmussen, they've been going back and forth. Trump up 1, him down 2, him down 3. Less than 2 weeks to go. It's a 3-point race. Let's see. 2 weeks ago, Biden had a 12-point lead. A month ago, Trump had a 1-point lead, I'm pretty sure. But either way, this is a poll that, people who want Trump to win will say, yeah, you got to look at this poll. This one's the only one that's right. And maybe they're right. I don't know. It's got Biden up in Arizona. It's Rasmussen, right? CNBC's got Biden up in some of these key states by 5, by 7, Florida, Michigan. It's got Biden up by 6 in Arizona. I mean, if these polls are even close to being right, it'll be a landslide Biden for Biden and his campaign. Now, here's the $1 million question. A lot could change in these polls, and they do. If something breaks with the so-called October surprise and something with these Biden emails, maybe it's garbage, maybe it's not. The debate tomorrow and all that could change the polls, and it could change the likelihood he's up or down in those states or nationally. What doesn't change is the states that are going to be important on November 3rd. Those should remain the same. How does North Carolina go if they go early? They're on the East Coast. Florida early, Ohio. And then if anybody has things that they read, don't make me your end all. There's a lot of guys that are, one thing I always live by is I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm smart enough to know that. So do your own homework. But those swing states and the way that they're reported and watching multiple channels, which we're going to be able to do in a room with more eyes and ears on different channels and resources, such as, there's a lot of cool websites that do, not just might, report, quicker than some of the, mainstream, whether it's cable channels or ABC, NBC, CBS, and whatnot. So this isn't necessarily rooting for who you want to win and not even rooting for your damn position, long or short. It's trying to find the tell. One other thing that I'll leave you guys with. In 2016, because there was such a dramatic move, and people are saying there's not going to be a lot of volatility this time. They don't know. There might not be, but there could be. They have no idea. Don't listen to those people. But the whole thing with this time around, if there's a big move down or up in the stocks, there's usually, or was in 16, it could be again, a nice lead lag with the bond market. So if they drop the S&P, bam, 10 handles lower, you didn't have a chance to catch the S&P short, but you could buy the bonds and they could walk up. So watch that if you're not going to be here November 3rd during the election night. I'm only having Edge members come to the election night because I'm not inviting the masses I don't want to have any unknowns or too many unknowns at all into the room that could be distracting and bringing their opinion too much with them. So you guys will get the link that we'll do it in. We might even do it in the Discord room. There are a handful of guys that are here today that aren't in the regular Edge group. So you guys might get an email with the discount code to be an Edge Pro member. Look at that email when you get it tonight or tomorrow. You guys are already Edge members. You don't have to worry about it. But just make sure. You got any questions? Do you have any comments? Play around with this map, unless you don't like elections or politics, but thanks, Soren. That's a nice factoid that we could never use. No, I'm only kidding. He says of the 45 presidents that have held office, only 10 have failed to win re-election. And a few of those are in modern history. Carter, H.W. Bush, there are two of them. There's no doubt the pandemic threw a ton of waves into what was Trump's greatest go-to, and that was the economic numbers that would have remained pretty strong had it not been for the pandemic. So I think this would have been a much different race, but it is what it is. So I think that certainty versus uncertainty is the biggest driver if we get uncertainty to the downside with the courts, no concession, things like that. At least near term and even longer term, if it's really wrapped up into questioning some states and really both sides shouldn't concede, one of those kinds of things. We're not used to it. When we got it in 2000, the hanging chads and all that stuff in Florida took 2 weeks. Supreme Court voted, and that was the first event, politically or not, that I made money on trading. I had just started, and probably 6 months into my electronic trading career, and Bush Gore, and the whole theme was if Bush wins, which means Gore, if Gore concedes and loses the Supreme Court decision, that's bullish for stocks, just based on Republican policy. And it was right. As soon as that crossed the wire, I made my first decent amount of money on an event because I was prepared for it. And hopefully I'll prepare you guys as we go through this in 2 weeks and then that night. And again, there'll be more information in 13 days than there is right now. Hell, there might be more information in 48 hours than there is right now, in 24 hours. So we'll see all you guys that are Edge members, I'm sure, Tuesday the 3rd. Those that aren't, you'll see an email to join. If you got any questions, email me, Anthony at edgetradinggroup.com. Have a safe night, guys. We'll see you room guys tomorrow morning. I'll stop the recording.